Welcome to the Closing the Wealth Gap Pain Truth Money series with your host, Raquel M.R. Thomas. Each episode is designed to teach you, discuss ways to elevate and motivate you.
Hello. Welcome to our third episode of Closing the Wealth Gap, Pain, Truth, and Money. I'm Raquel Richardson Thomas, and I am your host. And I want to start today by saying the NBA, the world, lost one of the best players of all time yesterday, and I want to take a moment and let the Bryant family know that they're in my prayers, and everyone else I know. I'm a huge basketball fan, played in high school, played in college, and grew up watching Kobe play, and today's a tough one. It's a tough one to know that we've lost such a giant in more ways than one. So to the Kobe Bryant family, we are praying for you, praying for your strength, and we're so sorry for your loss. But today on Closing the Wealth Gap, Pain, Truth, Money, we're going to talk about community projects that help underserved communities, and it being one of the ways that we can close the wealth gap in the African American community. So community projects that help underserved communities. There are many programs that we can do, but we're going to talk about that in detail. But before I get going, I always like to start with a quote. And the quote that I chose today is, "Be willing to sacrifice everything, but compromise nothing in your quest to be the best." I'm going to read it one more time. "Be willing to sacrifice everything, but compromise nothing in your quest to be the best," by Kobe Bryant. One of the quotes that God has been near and dear to me in my growth as an entrepreneur, as a mother, as a wife, is to be the best and make the sacrifices that you have to make to do that. And sometimes that's not easy, but we have to be willing to make those sacrifices for our children, for our families, for our husbands, for our wives. But be willing to sacrifice everything, but compromise nothing in your quest to be the best, by Kobe Bryant. Moment of purpose. I love to let you all know why I do this, why I come on every Monday and share with you ways that we can close the wealth gap and talk about my personal experiences with you, because my goal is to inspire 10,000 minorities and business owners of color to close the wealth gap through the power of entrepreneurship. As many of you already know, I'm an entrepreneur, so I enjoy teaching what I know because I truly feel that we are stronger together. Our mission is to build people who build businesses, who build communities. And it's very simple. Building people who build businesses, who build communities. And the best way for us to do that is if we do it together. We must do it together. We're stronger together than as one individual. So let's jump right in. Community projects that help serve underserved communities. Well, one of the things that I do in underserved communities is I go out and I teach entrepreneurship to youth. I have a nonprofit organization called Dreamcatchers Foundation, and through Dreamcatcher Foundation, we work on projects to serve children in those communities. And what we love to do is teach them how to take their gifts and their talents and use them to monetize. But one of the things that we also teach when we're doing community projects is how important it is to practice. So make sure as you're creating these community events in underserved communities and teaching, and I give back by teaching. That's one of my gifts that God has given me, and a purpose that He's laid on my heart when it comes to helping underserved communities. But more importantly, it is a part of closing the wealth gap. When we teach, no one can take away the things that we have right here. So one of the most powerful tools in the world is knowledge. So I go out and I teach children in underserved communities how to build businesses, and we do workshops. We have classes once a month through Dreamcatchers Foundation. We host a summer camp as well. But during this time when I'm with the children, I literally focus on things that they're good at, and I always allow them to choose a business or something that they're passionate about, and we turn it into a business. So I literally go from A to Z, and I am teaching them how to turn their gift and their talent into a business. I always tell them that you have to practice. Practice makes perfect. You cannot really be great at whatever your gift and talent is without practice. So it requires us to constantly practice. So when we talk about closing the wealth gap, one of the major ways that we can close the wealth gap is literally by teaching. Knowledge is one of the most powerful tools in the world, and we have to continue to teach. One of the things that I have been focusing on, and I talked about this last week, is investment groups and how important that becomes. One of the things that I'm interested in as an entrepreneur that will help build communities and that will help close the wealth gap is investing into underserved communities or communities that are going through gentrification. My goal is to acquire real estate and put those, build those communities back up so that we can keep those tax dollars in that particular community, and that we focus in on how powerful we become when we create investment groups. So again, back to community projects. I also do parent literacy. Where I'm working with the parents, and I have done this through many schools. So schools here locally in South Carolina I've worked with, and we've worked on what do we need to do to help our children? What do we need to do to help them grow? What things should we be doing as parents to put ourselves in a better situation? This is a huge part of the wealth gap, because one of the things we teach is financial literacy. Financial literacy to our parents, because one of the things that has been a huge issue in our country is Americans having a savings account and being able to save. We know that a lot of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. And that is obviously a huge issue. So when I'm working with the parents, one of the larger components that I focus on is financial literacy. So we teach that to the parents, and in return they can teach that to their children, so that their children aren't learning the importance of financial literacy in their generation. So one of the goals is to provide a generational teaching, right, where the parent can teach the child can teach their child, and so on and so forth. So parent literacy is big for my give back in the communities, which is a part of closing the wealth gap, and that's the part that that's the knowledge that I give to the parents. Many of them, you'll be surprised, they don't know this information, and they're just looking for some of us to come out and help them and teach them and give them resources that they don't typically have in those underserved communities. So when we talk about closing the wealth gap, one of the ways that I close the wealth gap personally as a business owner, entrepreneur, through my nonprofit organization, I go out and I teach children in underserved communities entrepreneurship and how to turn their gifts and talents into a operation, and that turns into revenue. And for the parents, I teach entrepreneurship classes to them, but I focus on things like financial literacy, which are which will be a huge tool for a parent, and then in return teach it to their children. Moving on, pain, truth, money. Obviously, there's a lot of pain in the underserved communities. There are a lot of resources that are not there that are needed. There are generational curses and chains that need to be broken and then put back together stronger, bigger, and better. And we do that by helping each other. We do that by going into those communities and helping them rebuild and build a better foundation. So that's the pain piece. The truth piece is we have to be willing to have open dialogue and to have the conversations that are difficult, to have conversations about the things that we're not doing well in the underserved communities, the things that we need to do better, the areas that we lack that we can do better, bad choices that we continue to make. So we have to be truthful. So when we go into those underserved communities, we have to be very honest with ourselves, and then those communities have to be very honest with us when we start talking about the things that they need so that we can help them rebuild their communities to be stronger. And money is always a part of projects when you're talking about underserved communities, because they need financial assistance in many cases. So when I go in, I pay for all the material that I take in. So if we have books or crayons, markers, paper, whatever the case may be, I provide those things to those communities so that we don't have a child not participate because of money. So when we go into these communities and we implement these special projects, there will be money that is involved, and in most cases we hope that we can absorb that. And as an entrepreneur, I've been able to put myself in a situation where I can absorb that expense as I go in and teach to those individuals that are in those communities. So Paying Truth Money, how it ties into closing the wealth gap and working with underserved communities and how important that becomes. Now, we are at the end of this show. Again, I want to send my condolences to the Bryant family and all the other families that lost their lives yesterday. We are praying for you. We are sadly, we're sad all around the world, and I want to extend my condolences. For those of you who have the opportunity to go home to your families, your husband, your wives, your children, hug them tight. Hug them tight and let them know that you love them, because tomorrow is not promised to any of us. Tomorrow is not promised to any of us. So make sure you put your arms around the people that you love, because tomorrow is certainly not promised. The quote of the day is, "Be willing to sacrifice everything, but compromise nothing in your quest to be the best," by Kobe Bryant. I extend that to all of you. Be willing to sacrifice everything to get to greatness. I'm going to close out with my question, and I always have this question. What would you do if you were not afraid? What would you do if you were not afraid? If you're scared to go to the next level, move to the next step, do it anyway. Do it afraid, because someone needs you, and your family and your legacy needs you to move into faith, walk in blind faith, and do it scared. Do it anyway. And I'll ask again, what would you do if you were not afraid? What would you do if you were not afraid? I'm Raquel Richardson Thomas. Thank you so much for joining me for Closing the Wealth Gap, Paying Truth and Money. This is episode 3. If you're not following me on Instagram, please do. It's RaquelRT3 on Instagram. I'm Raquel MR Thomas MBA on Facebook. My website is www.raquelmrthomas.com. I look forward to speaking with you guys next week. Make sure you tune in to Raquel's Business Motivational Mastermind, which we host live on Instagram. Excuse me, not live, but it's a recording that we put on Instagram, and we're talking to business owners and motivating them to keep pushing, keep growing. And again, our goal, my number one goal, is to build 10,000 minorities and business owners of color, helping them close the wealth gap. And I love to do that through the power of entrepreneurship. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm Raquel Richardson Thomas. I will see you guys next time.
This has been a Closing the Wealth Gap Paying Truth Money episode. To find more and follow Raquel, please go to RaquelMRThomas.com.